The Gentlementor.
The first step to any kind of the building blocks of creation is a desire. Then the desire starts to run, and that's like the want, right? The will. And then the will starts to take form in thoughts and speech and actions and comes down all the way down to the mundane. So it's here. Must have wanted it. Must have been a desire for it to some degree. So in this discourse that I was learning a couple of weeks ago, the fifth Chabad Rebbe illustrates this in such a powerful way. You could really apply it parenting to so much of like your own human. He describes that God must have wanted it, but he only wanted it here in this world because he wanted to have the most meaningful relationship with us. And he could only have a meaningful relationship with us if we have to some degree the sense of otherness from God, right? Like the sun and like the ray of the sun that we discussed earlier. Mm-hmm. So meaning he doesn't really want it in and of itself, right? He wants it because he wants us. So now he like illustrates that, like that whole school train of thought, and then now like kind of like reverse that. So what does this energy feel? So this is the energy that feels completely separate from God. It only sees itself. So if it only sees itself, it's disintegrated. It's a closed system. It doesn't think it needs anything from God. It doesn't seek to have any light from God or anything, any kind of expression, any kind of relationship with God. It doesn't need God, right? And so it's kind of like it's like, go back to like the God's perspective. Like there's two people sitting at a desk job. One loves what he's doing. One doesn't love what he's doing. Like he's there because he wants to collect a paycheck, and the other guy loves his work. So the guy who loves his work is completely invested. So all of his energies, all of his the light is just shining in the work. It's being created, and there's so much love and all this positive energy. And the fellow who's, let's call it what it is, checked out, there's all this, maybe you want to say it's benign, but it's not. It's like negative energy. He's even though he's checked out because he's only there because he wants something else, not in and of itself. So now go back to the perspective of this energy, this checked out energy. Like as soon as this checked out energy wants to have a relationship with God, it's no more the other side. In Chassidus, it explains that it's like two sides, like facing the other way. They're very close. It's all God, but they're not facing each other, right? And we have that within us to some degree. It's in this world, and how much we give it energy, like just scrolling through social media and whatever it is, we give that void and energy. Then snakes and scorpions are going to find themselves in that void. I'm sorry, I'm going on a little tangent here.
No, that's good.
You're in good company. Proceed.
It says in the Bible that when Joseph was thrown into the pit by his brothers, it says the words in the Bible are that the pit was empty, barek, ve'ein bo mayim, and there was no water. So Rashi was a French commentator. He's like, okay, like we know that every single word in Torah is really important and has meaning. The Torah just told us that the pit was empty. Of course, there's no water in there. What is it adding when saying there's no water? So he says that pits that had some water in there before, or there were like, right, then it's not a void for snakes, scorpions. It's not a dry pit. So the Torah is telling us that not just that it was an empty pit that wasn't filled with some major substance, but it was the kind of pit that had no water. It was snakes and scorpions, and that's why Joseph's life was threatened by being thrown into the pit. So it's such an amazing idea of like, if you are checked out, not present, right? Like not actually investing your energies into something, the vacuum for just snakes, scorpions, all
that's the social media audience right there.
It's the empty glass.
Right. So I think that the same is true when we check into these ideas of parenting. When we check into that, and we're investing in that.
Go.
Okay.
Beautiful segue. That was beautiful.
I was trying to, So that then what ends up happening is the ultimate desire shines, the ultimate relationship shines forth, the full investment is realized. But when we're not, even for a moment, and this is another point I wanted to make about parenting, and the idea of just even a moment, we might think, oh, we're just checked out for a moment, it's not a big deal, but we're actually creating and giving space for these undesirable energies, which can be catapult a child into a pretty dangerous place. And I said I try to profile for that moment. I'm in my mid-30s. You guys are a little older than me. We've lived a greater portion of our lives than our children have. So just like mathematically, like every moment for them is like their human experience. Like this is everything. Yeah. This is like the whole moment. And for us, that same interaction, we're there at the same time as them, and we're trying to discipline them, or we're trying to have this kind of communication, why they're not listening to us, or whatever it might be. For us, it's just another moment in a 35, 36 years of life. Like we have that breadth of vision, of
perspective.
Life.
Get perspective. Yeah.
For them, that one moment that like you come down hard on them, and it could just totally define them, which brings me to the second point, the second idea in this course, which is know who you're speaking to. Know who you're speaking to. You're speaking to a soul, a spark of godliness. You are vested with the responsibility to talk to this soul and to guide this soul. You have no permission to just take a huge, dump, just like totally on this. You have no permission. You got to angry, you couldn't get yourself in check. You got a partner that has unlimited resources. This moment can change this child's and define this child's life forever. And I don't mean that like, I mean it like for real. Like let's get present. Like really get that idea that each of these moments are so like building blocks, foundational building blocks for this child's human experience in this world. And so I illustrated the idea before I just said what the idea is. The first idea we discussed was that we have the unlimited resources because we're partners with God. And the second idea is that the child is a spark of God, just like you, that you were vested with responsibility for. And you have to know who you're talking to. And you have to have, to take that idea even further, you have to have unconditional pride in your child. So just like you try to have the same pride when your child is metaphorically smacking you in the face, whatever it is that they might be doing to you. Everyone's is something else. Try to have the same pride that you had the moment that they were born. Try that exercise. The moment they were born, they didn't do anything. They didn't accomplish anything. All they have is a dirty diaper and they're slobbering everywhere. Yep. They haven't done anything in this world. But you're filled with a amount of goodness and pride. You created something.
Yeah.
Try to have that same pride when the child's not doing something great. And the challenge is, Mark, we spoke about this idea. The challenge is that we are conditioned to look at our child's behaviors and then equate the amount of love, equate the amount of pride that we're going to shine down.
Yeah.
You have to know who you're speaking to, and then maybe you can help them, but you can't don't get involved if you don't know who you're speaking to.
Right. Why do we get different permissions to father different than God does?
Why do you think that God fathers us differently?
I don't think he does. I think he is. I'm going to go back to the word you used. I
agree with you. I thought you were saying
we shouldn't have the permission, and we base, exactly our child's love. I always used to say God has a favorite child. It's me. I'm his favorite. But I think that's, naturally God can do that. Now, as we're human naturally, and there's probably that sense in us that we have a favorite child. That's just, God doesn't have that ability, I don't think. Well, and I hate to say that because you're the one that always kicks me for putting God in a box or trying to define God. Yes, you are.
Your own podcast.
But I just don't, the scripture says that God cannot lie. Okay, can he not? He has not. Can he not? But he's God, right? I mean, but he is bound by his word. Anyway, that's a whole nother theological conversation. That's another podcast.
That's a very deep conversation. It's not only that.
Really? I think that one's really easy.
Can God create a
God can't lie because anything he says comes to pass. When God speaks, it comes to pass. It is because he spoke.
So it's not
So
because
it's no
he
longer a
cannot
lie.
tell a lie.
Yeah.
It's because everything that he speaks is truth.
He creates reality.
Yeah, but so guys, we're trying to figure out something within the realm of intellect right now.
There he goes. See.
Podcast. We don't claim to be thoughtful people. We claim to be people who talk about things.
Here's one day when I stand in front of God and God looks at me and goes, "What's the greatest thing you learned from AVREMEL?" I'm going to say, "He told me that I can't define you, Lord." And I think that has been, and let me tell you something, man, that has been the biggest pressure off of my life, is when I just go, you know what? There's no way I can define or have a clue to know what God is thinking or what he's doing. And for me to understand it. Now I know what he's doing because he gives us his word. He has a plan for us. But for me to, we were talking about that, I think last time, Doug, we were talking about when a child dies. There's nothing that God can say to a parent who's lost a kid that's going to make them go, "You're right, God. You're absolutely right. That I'm glad that they did die." Nothing. And he's God, but there's nothing that he can say that's going to make a parent go, "Oh, okay, now I understand why my child is dead." I'm sorry, that got real dark and morbid the last minute there. I apologize.
Yeah, Mark. But there's something very raw to in Judaism, there's like a whole mourning period.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of time with mourning, right? So like if somebody passes away, there's a period before before the loved one is buried, and there's like a whole set of rules and different things, different customs, and then there's Shiva. There's 7 days of the family staying at home, and they have all the prayers at the house, and people come to visit. And then there's 30-day period, and it's like, and then there's a year period, and then the mourning ends after the year. But there's different degrees of mourning, and it's interesting to what you're saying is all of it is human experience, the losing a loved one, and these life cycles that we all experience, and the ups and the downs. When we're not in touch with them, they're very dark. But when we are in touch with them, and we have good people around us, and we're open to the love and to the whole experience, it's not dark. It's sad, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't thought about like the right words to describe it, but it's not dark. It's not morbid. It's. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I know what you mean.
And that's all. Like, imagine there was none of that in this world. It'd be a bunch of AI robots, just like, little bots have very little meaning.
I would like to, at some point, to discuss further at some other time. We talked about, and we touched on this a little bit one time before, but you were talking about the two sides when you were using the example of God, the good and the not good of the world, the evil of the world. They're two sides. Almost, I was thinking two sides of the same coin, but they're facing away from each other.
Right.
That I feel like that we can unpack that a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
A little bit more. And I always think back, and here I'm going to get into it. I always think back of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were bent on not bowing to Nebuchadnezzar's idol.
Wait, who is this?
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Okay, yeah. So the whole is yeah.
Am I?
No, you're saying it properly. I only know the Hebrew. Okay.
Okay, what are the Hebrew names?
Ananya,
I want to know.
Ananya, Mishael, and Azariah. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, sure. They were thrown in the furnace, right?
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing: is that was all basically it sets the enemy up to black his own eye, because he was out to try and destroy the Hebrew culture, making them bow to the to Nebuchadnezzar, King Nebuchadnezzar's idol. They refused to. But the funny thing is that Nebuchadnezzar had collected all the world leaders at the time to be there at this moment. And what did they go home talking about? Did they go home talking about Nebuchadnezzar's fabulous statue? Right. No, they went home talking about the three guys who didn't get burnt in the furnace. And when they were there was four of them in there, and they were like, whoa, wait a minute. So really, God used an instance like that to really just, because they went home talking about him. And so it was a way for, like I like to say, it was a way for the devil to give himself a black eye, because what he tried out for bad, God turned out to glorify himself.
Yeah, that just brings up a really important thought. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, the last Lubavitcher Rebbe, passed away in 1994. The last discourse that he gave out, and these Hasidic discourses are like extremely deep. You got to totally unpack these really deep ideas. Talks about the idea of like being thrown into a fire for your faith, right? Like that kind of a test, and how the test of living in a free country is a way harder test on your faith. Okay. And it's just like such a powerful idea. Like when somebody comes over to you, Mark, and says, you know, and Jews have dealt with this all like throughout history, right? Like the Spanish Inquisition, convert or die. Yeah. Convert or die. Like that's been like and you have all these stories of, no, I'm not going to bow down, and they get thrown into a furnace, or they get hung and burnt alive, or I mean, I don't want to go morbid, right? But all of these. No,
come on.
No. We got to hold back now?
my grandfather. I mean, it goes like my grandmother went through the Holocaust. Like we live with these stories of people who were. Absolutely. You know, their identity, their faith, was going to determine whether they're going to live or die, right? And in those cases, it's amazing to see that the spark of faith just like totally ignites, because it has something that's contrasting it in such a powerful way. Like it has no choice; it has to make that decision. What's the real, true decision? What's the real identity? So the real identity comes out. Like what? I'm not trying to diminish the experience they had, God forbid. I'm saying that at that moment, they had two choices, you know, give up their identity, who they were, or keep it. And they chose to keep it. And all the other superficial and you know, the facades and the shallow parts of life and any ideas or thoughts that they ever like had, those went by the wayside. It was only right now, who are you, right? Like that was it. Everything else was stripped. We don't have that experience now. No one's coming to me and saying that you believe in God or else, or
because now you can make up your own identity and be whatever you want, right?
Oh yeah, you could, exactly. So you're gonna have to edit that part.
No.
You have but in this discourse he discusses this idea of how like right now it's in a way a much more challenging time.
I get it. Yeah.
And it's you know, it's also empowering though, because God did give us, like, we live in America, the land of the free. And this Lubavitcher Rebbe passed away in 1994. That's all he talked about, like how like when he talked about America, he talked about it, like he called it the Melucha, the kingdom of kindness. The Jews never experienced that, like just a kingdom of kindness, just like live.
That's what they called America.
That's what he called America.
That's what he called America.
Yeah,
the kingdom of kindness.
Melucha shel chesed, which means a kingdom of kindness.
Man, how things have changed.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we have it though. We still have to be grateful for what we have, and
we are, and we're thankful, and we're proud of it too.
Right,
fiercely.
Fiercely, like my children. I'm proud of them.
Yeah. I wanted to just touch upon one thing, going back to the second point of that this course I'm taking, how the child is the soul, and that's how we have to look at them. When we look at our child, meditate about, like, your child is, you know, being disrespectful to you and wants their friends over and whatever it is, just a struggle. You look at them, you're able to like totally disconnect from the feelings of like resentment, and I'm gonna like put this kid in his place or whatever, and you're able to meditate how actually there's this like confused soul right now in front of me, and I gotta like calm it down, be there for it, and help it out. And you look at it from the perspective of a soul. Like it's a lot easier to have unconditional love and unconditional pride because you're not defining your child by the action he just took or the behavior he just took, defining by who he really is. Well, who is he really? He's a soul. Who's she really? So, Mark, you and I had this conversation before Rosh Hashanah. Like I told you I wrote something. Like I like to write for myself before the high holidays. Just like I'm not a big writer, but I write, some thoughts down. Yeah. I shared a thought with you about how as parents, our children are an extension of us to some degree, right? They're their own entity, absolutely, but to some degree, they're our child. They'll always be our child, our children, like we will always be God's children, regardless of how many times you try to sever that relationship. But what we see in our children is we see the things that we're proud of, the things about ourselves that we're proud of, and things about ourselves that we're not proud of. We see it in our kids. At the same time, from the kids' perspective, what they're most influenced by, the biggest influence in their world is their parents. It's the biggest influence in the world. Sometimes they check out of that because the relationship's not good and they'll find other, but the biggest influence in the world is their parents, especially when they're young. And the way that the way it's expressed is how the way not expressed. I have to find the right term for this, but I'll mumble through it, and I'm sure it'll come out.
Manifested.
But the way for them, yes, that's a good word. The way it's manifested for them is how they feel we see them.
Yeah.
Right. So when we see them and in a way of celebration constantly, right? They feel celebrated. They feel empowered. They feel, ready to take that next step of growth. They're in that growth mindset. When we see them, when they feel that we see them in a way of, hurt and a disappointment, right? That completely defines them and affects them in a major way. So I was writing this, and I thought I shared it with you how there's this negative feedback loop to some degree that we have to be super aware of as parents, that we have to be aware that we see parts of ourselves that we don't like in our children. And chances are, because we're human, we're going to feel something about that. And chances are, because we're human, we're going to express that feeling somehow in a tone of voice and somewhere, maybe very subtly. And we just need to be aware that the thing that's most important to them is how we see them. And they don't have the awareness that we're seeing ourselves and all this, this concept. They don't have that at all. They don't understand the dynamics of the relationship yet, right? But what do they see? They see how we see them. That's how they see. That's what they're most influenced by. I'll tell you one anecdote, but it's not really an anecdote, but like a story where you can see this is the story of Joseph when he was running, the story with Potiphar and Mrs. Potiphar.
I remember this story. Yes, you were telling me.
So the commentaries say that that Joseph saw an image of his dad. But if you read the words, you could read it that Joseph saw how his dad saw him. Joseph saw how his dad was proud of him in his ups and his downs, unconditionally. Joseph saw that his father saw him as a soul with unlimited power and unlimited energy. And he was able to reverse this, this decision that he made. It was a decision he made. He was about to act upon it. Yeah. It's I think it's like an unbelievably powerful idea. Unbelievably powerful idea.
That's my favorite story in scripture. And since you told me that a few weeks back or last month, when we were talking about that, that's been rolling around in my head. about Joseph not making that choice or reverting that choice because and what his father thought of him based on what his father thought of him, but also that could be a twofold: his spiritual father, his heavenly father, and his earthly father, both, right? Could it
Yeah,
be?
absolutely.
So, yeah. So that was huge. That was a big turnaround for me. And that again, that's my favorite story in scripture. And to have a new perspective on the way Joseph changed his mind to have an affair with Potiphar's wife is just, that's, yeah.
The Gentlementor.